Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Quite a varied and widespread congregation for you this evening. We've got a fun corner and we've got a serious corner, and then we've got Norway. Right, where should we start? How should we start? Let's start with the boys from H&R Drone Racing. That's Rich and Harry Middleton. And then their neighbours are Bruce. They're not very far away. They can't be very far away. They're in New Zealand. If you haven't seen their channel, then you should have. Well, I should have prepared. I should have prepared better. I should have had this ready to go as I said that. If you haven't seen their channel, give it a look. It's really fun, and I enjoy their energy. Not sure I enjoy their music, but I enjoy their energy. And now there's music as well, music and japes. It's very good. And you've recently been building a really large multirotor, so that's what grabbed my attention really. How's it going? You had its maiden flight. What's happened since?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's coming along well. We've been building it for maybe around sort of 3 months now. So it's the main challenge with it is it's in pretty much 90% full 3D printed, but using carbon fiber filament PPACF. So we're mainly printing that on the K2 Plus. So what's that? Mainly like 350 by 350 build size. So that's
for the body structure, and then it's got some big arms and huge ass motors. 32-inch props. So it's pretty big.
And the main reason is the sponsor came to us and they came up with this idea, and we sort of collaborated with them. And
to fly a 3D printer. So they want a 3D printed flying 3D printer. So yeah, that's the plan. So we got up to maiden flight, and that was successful last week.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Last week, and just like a little maiden flight test with maybe maybe
2 meters off the ground.
Yeah.
Just a small little hover, just because it's using audio parts. So, you got to work your way up to success. Small steps, build your way up, and then eventually you're into the world of flying. So we're sort of starting in the workshop. We're sort of starting to build the frame to hold the Corellia High 3D printer on top to complete the task. So that's where we're at. It's going pretty well so far.
Yeah, no, initial stages are looking good, and yeah, no oscillation in the arms or anything, so it's good.
Yeah.
I was very impressed with all the safety precautions you took, the helmet, the shield, and I wondered on the left-hand side of the frame what is that? Is that your wind chimes frame or your swing frame, or you got?
So at one point in time we were really into Ninja Warrior, so it's a salmon ladder. So you just go up and down.
Okay.
Just like
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Gary, is it worth just showing a few seconds of video of it for the whole audience to see?
I suppose it is. You get talking, and I'll go off and find a few seconds of video.
Yeah.
Well, I'm interested. If you're doing the 3D printer, you can't just fly the 3D printer. You've got to fly the 3D printer whilst it's 3D printing a small model of a drone.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. What do you think we should print?
Well, a small drone.
You should print a drone.
A drone.
I do think it should be tethered though. I think it should be tethered, because otherwise it's going to, it's not, you're just going to get some small part of the drone. If you get a tethered part and then you have it printed, you could be the world's first 3D printed drone while it's flying. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it reduces weight as well. So like the power source, you have it untethered and stuff like that.
You could theoretically fly for no limit on the flight time, right?
No limit.
Yeah, no, that'd be cool.
I'm just going to leave that running there, so we'll get to you'll see the frame I'm talking about in a minute in the background. It intrigues me, and it's quite a small area you're flying in, chaps. Yeah, it's quite brave for you. Your first.
As we always say, you got to risk it to get the biscuit. But the main reason was because we've sort of been in New Zealand. We've been sort of battered by floods and rain and extreme weather. So we only had about a two-hour window, and there's pretty intense wind around that. So that's why it's completely covered by trees. So that's why we chose that specific spot. So yeah, maybe a little close to the action, as it were. But
it makes it more exciting, then, doesn't it?
Makes it more exciting, and it also allowed us to get this maiden flight done that week.
Yeah, for sure.
So you can see that center mass is all carbon fiber printed with the little FPV camera on the front, which is that white TPU on the front there, and
It's got batteries on the side. You can see. Oh, there's one sticking up with an antenna.
and the riot shield is on my left.
Yes, SWAT team, and you even had air cover there just to
That's
make
right,
sure
yeah.
all had them orbiting and clearing the airspace for you and everything. That's
That's right,
pretty amazing. Is that like an EDU 650 power distribution board or something I can see on the top there?
Yeah, it's just a standard Tarot, I think, put it out. Yeah, it's just 2 6s to make up 12, which is what we need for that particular design.
Yeah, 12S system. Yeah.
12S.
Yeah.
And so where's the put? Obviously, you're going to put everything. You're going to put the printer on top of all that lot. So you're going to mount it on something there.
Yeah,
Or is it going to be underneath?
At this stage, I believe on top. That's what we're going to go for.
Well, what do you guys reckon? Do you think it's still in the design stage? What do you guys reckon would be more stable?
Well, a bit of mass higher is normally so. Well, see what the people in the comments say, but I would say
sure.
at the top. But if you had to print something, I mean, how are you going to power the printer?
Yeah, that's quite a challenge in itself. Like, I mean, you could obviously use an inverter with a power source, but of course, then you're adding more extra load. Or you can do like a friend said before, and use a tethered with power to it. That might be a more simpler way, keep the weight down. Or yeah, what do you reckon?
Open for ideas for sure. Yeah, but it's a great challenge.
Well, it's a pretty cool looking machine, and quite by chance, of course, it's just a sort of large machine that if you were moving stuff into a prison, it'd be absolutely ideal. You can get loads of stuff in there because that's the topic we'll be coming on to later. So, drug lords everywhere. If you're tuning in, there's H&R drone race. No, I shouldn't say stuff like that, should I? But it's no, it's amazing stuff. Oh, Tony White, hello. Stay with Mass below, says Tony White. That's what he says.
Nice.
And Sean's after cigarettes, so we can just deliver him some cigarettes. That'll be really splendid. No, so for our normal guys, it's definitely worth looking at their channel. It's a great channel. Lots of fun projects on there, and I wish you every success with that. I really do.
Later on in the show, we've got some projects we can show. You can show you a close up of the drone. It's just sitting over there if you want.
Yeah. Oh no, bring it on. No, bring it now. Bring it now.
Yeah. Bring it now.
Yeah. Okay. Bring it on. Bring it on. We'll come on down. The price is right.
That's a good show. I'll bring it. I'll bring the laptop over. It's too big to move into the spot, but yeah.
Okay. This will be interesting with the Oh no, I'm going to do that. Okay.
I'll move the camera. Hopefully it all stays live.
Perhaps Bruce hasn't turned up because there's some sort of rule that we're only allowed one input from New Zealand. Maybe it uses all the internet, New Zealand's internet. Oh, here we go.
So yeah, so it's about the size of a small hatchback to give you an idea of scale in terms of width. And yeah, and that's the printer that's going to be. And that's the printer in the background that will be flying on top.
Okay.
Or under.
Okay. Over it goes. No, that'll be grand. We'll look forward to seeing that. And you're flying. What about the wingsuit? Is that in the shed?
The wingsuit. We're actually working on that at the moment. So it's not in the shed at the moment. It's at another workshop. But we do have the Mark 1 for you. I can bring that down. For the jet.
Yeah, and Aircraft Design Royalty has entered the chat. Good evening, Think Flight. So yeah, he's watching. He'll be picking up tips from you lads.
Oh, yeah. Cool, man. Okay, so this Richard's just going to bring in. This is running on Autopilot as well. This is a jetpack design that we are running at the moment. This is it's got EDF 70mm EDF. Hang on, just turn the screen a little bit. And yeah, so this is about 1 meter wingspan, just across. But he's running 2 EDF 70mm EDF turbine jets, and then we got a man that sits on the front, Richard.
And it's all 3D printed.
It's all 3D printed on that big 3D printer, and then it's got a parachute, so it doesn't land like the normal design, just like coming down on a taxi. It lands with the parachute, so it has a parachute that will deploy from here. There's a parachute, giant parachute, and that I'll just move that out of the way, and then the main thing is it needs the man. So that guy,
it's like the Dubai.
it's like the Dubai jetpack man. The
yeah. That's awesome.
So that scaled me. We just scaled Richard actually. Richard's we full scanned him into software and then shrunk him down. That's why he's kind of like that.
So with you being twins, how did you decide which one of you to scan? How did that work? Or was that a uni scan? You could just say either of your names.
Yeah, exactly. So this was me, and then this is Richard, and then I got to be the wingsuit on the Mark II version, which is what we work on at the moment. And yeah, just put that one down and grab the wingsuit, man, the Mark I. Richard's running around in the background, but yes, we kind of come up with our own designs. Some are designed on, kind of scaled from like we're saying, the Dubai jetpack. But yeah, we bring wingsuiters on for advice and things on our channel. And so like when we made this guy, this is the Mark I wingsuit man. Hang on, let me bring that light in a little bit. So yeah, that's it's all sewed up and stuff. We do all our own work. And yes, just like the proper wingsuits, they have the parachute on deploys from the back and FPV from the head. So yeah, and it's all got flaps and arons and all sorts.
Great stuff. Great stuff. No, I love the energy of your channel, and I know that our normal viewers are that way inclined as well. So head on over to H&R Drone Racing, guys. Let's move into some slightly more serious stuff now. Richard Ryan has, I promised last week that we'd be doing the letters remote ID. Richard Ryan has it. I spoke to him earlier this evening. He has written the letters. I haven't published them, or the serving suggestion. I haven't published them yet, but he's not very well at the moment. Perhaps he's down the pub, one or the other. But he will be on next week, and we'll talk about UK remote ID next week. But Ian, do you want to? How do you want to go with this?
Well, I'll start with a bit of an introduction, and then if John can jump in, and then Steve as well when we move on to the drone bit. So my concern we've seen over the last number of years, drones being sort of at the forefront, very much the narrative of the problem in prisons. But I know having sort of followed news reports over the years, even before drones existed, there was a lot of problems already building up in prisons with corrupt prison staff. And so, I mean, it was in the thousands. And so I've just got concerned that drones have become a scapegoat. They've become convenient. They're kind of like the thing you push to the media, and it's kind of a distraction for everything else that's going on behind. So it's not to say they're not an issue. They definitely are. And Steve can talk about how that was dealt with in the past. And maybe there's lessons to be learned to say, actually, we need to be, implementing some of the same tactics that once were. But I'm concerned that certainly at this point in time, there's a lot of noise around there that's distracting from bigger issues. And it's almost convenient that you can give that to the press, and then the questions aren't asked. So at this point, if John can introduce himself and his experience, and then sort of give his views on the world of prisons.
Well, John Podmore. I've been in the prison business for 40 years now. I was a governor of Brixton and Belmarsh, which you've probably heard of, and a place called Swaleside, which is not in Yorkshire. It's on the Isle of Sheppey. I was also a prison inspector, so I can relate to a lot of the prison inspections that are talking about drones. But I've developed a kind of a particular interest in prison corruption. I set up and ran the Kent Prison Anti-Corruption Unit. I then became head of the nationwide Prisons Corruption Prevention Unit. I was also head of the London Prisons Anti-Corruption Team, and I've worked for UNODC, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, writing about corruption in prisons. Worked out in Argentina, helping them develop a corruption prevention strategy. And I'm currently working with the Committee for the Prevention of Torture, Inhumane and Degrading Treatment, looking about how corruption can impact on that. So a lot of experience around corruption. I suppose the thing is, as far as drones are concerned, you're absolutely right. It's not, the answer's drones. What's the question? And in terms of contraband getting into prison, there are a number of ways, and clearly drones are nice and sexy, make good headlines. I know some journalists who have been sort of out there sort of watching them. So drones is a source. So too are the probably precursors to drones, which was chucking them over the wall. So you'd stick him in a dead pigeon, chuck that over the wall. You'd stick him in a tennis ball. So throwovers was another way. With artificial drugs like spice, you can now impregnate that on paper. You can put it in the post. You can smuggle it in coffee, tea, bacon, whatever's coming into the prison. Visitors used to be the kind of the bête noire of it all. It was all coming in with visitors, which again I also thought was a kind of slightly overstated. But if you say to me, and I've said this publicly on a number of occasions, and I've written books and papers on the whole thing, in my experience, the main source of drugs in prison are corrupt staff. Now, people then sort of start hitting me over the head and say, "Oh, not all corrupt staff, not all prison staff are corrupt." No, they're not. It's only a small minority. And if you were to say to me, if you had in any cohort 100 corrupt prison staff, how many there were dint of being inherently criminals? Probably about 5%. The remainder are threatened, blackmailed, cajoled, conditioned, manipulated, and we can talk about that. But my biggest find was strapped to the legs of a prison officer. He could barely walk for the cannabis strapped to his legs. Now that's my view, and one of the big problems is, and you alluded to, drones, is saying to the prison service, well, what do the figures show you? You are finding these drugs, so you attribute the fines to the methods and come up with a figure and tell us, well, of all the drugs found in prison, most this year were found on drones or on prison staff or on paper. So that brings us to the first problem. And if I would say to you that a drug find in prison terms could be a burnt piece of silver foil, which if you're any knowledge of taking things like heroin, you'll understand what that means. That's a drug find. 10 kilos strapped to the legs of a prison officer, that's a find. And what the prison service don't do is really measure what they're finding. They also don't know what they're finding, because you can find a substance, and to really know what it is, you've got to sort of get it tested. Well, that isn't done because they're finding so many, costs so much. So a lot of the finds are assumed to be spice, assumed to be cannabis. Back in the day, well, you still can. You can get a lump of cannabis and you can test it, and you can find its source, its nationality, where it's come from. You can find the batch, and the same is true with a lot of the artificial drugs like spice, because prisoners are taking stuff. Part of the problem is they don't know what they're taking, and the people who are selling them don't know what they're selling. And very often they will bribe, cajole, or beat someone to take this illicit substance, and then they'll watch and see and see what happens. So in terms of the methods coming in, and if you find a big lump of heroin strapped to the bottom of a drone, you can attribute it to drones. If you find it in a cell, you can attribute it to, if you find it on a visitor, you can attribute. So you can do that work, but the prison service doesn't do it. So it should be, so I say, well, in my opinion, based on 40 years experience of what I've been doing, that is my belief. If the prison service want to come back and say, no, here is the stats, here is the evidence, here is the fines, here's the attributed methods, this is what we've come up with. Now, when I was governing, drones weren't around, but I read the headlines like you. I read the reports from the chief inspector, and we've got a superb chief inspector of prisons. It is clearly a problem. And one of the things I'm hoping to learn out, hopefully I'm going to inform you lot, but also what I've been sort of going on for a long time is, what is being done? Why isn't anything being done to stop them? And that's where my knowledge base just evaporates. So I won't go on forever. That's my opening gambit.
Yeah, just to jump in, and then you can sort of give me some information around this or some views. So what I found frustrating, first of all, is I've done a freedom of information to the prison service and said, could you just, much like you were talking about then, can you just quantify how much you're getting in by drones, how much by staff, how much by the mailroom, etc. And admittedly, you're not going to find it all as you've mentioned, but if you could just even mention what you have found, it gives you something to go on, and then you can say, actually, well, this looks like the bigger issue. So they won't even do that, and that already makes me a bit suspicious of it all when you're saying drones are the problem. It's like, oh, fair enough then. Just can we just see the evidence? That's all I'm asking for. Just can we see the? And it's like, no.
As I said, they can't give it to you because they don't know. They're not hiding the info. They haven't got it because they don't measure it.
I guess that'd be fine if you said that, but they don't. They just say, well, we can't tell you because national security and that kind of thing. So that's the problem. They're not transparent about why they can't provide data.
Well, I was going to jump in and say it's quite interesting that you said the things that were a drug find, the various attributes of that, because it's very much like when the police say there's been 10,000 drone complaints or 10,000, and what it actually is, it's 10,000 drone mentions. The police will record. We know this from Ian's freedom of information work. And other things, they will record if a commercial operator rings them up and says, hello, I'm operating in the bridge in the centre of town all day, just so you know, click, thank you, dear police service. They log that as a drone incident. So even people that are ringing up for genuine, normal, completely legal flights goes down, marked down as a drone incident. And it's just how numbers end up being there is very worrying. But I suspect this applies across every aspect of society, that numbers are counted and used in whichever way is useful for whatever you're trying to prove with those numbers. But I just found it interesting because that wrap of tinfoil versus 10 kilos. So would that be what that's a drug incident? But quite plainly, very different, very, very different in scale.
Just a little bit,
yes, quite so. Sorry, Ian, back to you.
Yeah, I was jumping on the chief inspector of prisons because I do have a concern with the presentation about drones. It strikes me as he's had somebody in his ear, possibly someone that sells counter drone gear, kind of. Because he has certain views of the world, which, as the drone community as a whole, we wouldn't share. So, for example, there was a whole narrative of like, oh well, drones could be flying somebody out of prison. Well, as you see with the guys above as well, building a big drone of that, it isn't a trivial. It isn't a trivial
you have to
task.
have some skills. You'd have to have some absolute serious skills to be able to pull off a trick like that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of risk with it. If you're going to commit that much time and energy, you could probably do less time and energy by renting a helicopter or having a pilot or taking a pilot's family hostage and say, fly someone in or out. So it's like there's always these really extreme narratives that's so unlikely. They get presented as though, oh, this is so trivial and it could just be done like that. It's not the case. And there's also the narrative about jammers. You can just do radio jammers and the problem will go away. Well, that's not true either, because as we've seen in the Ukraine, as soon as you try and jam something, there is a counter to that. As Steve knows, there's already drones going into prisons that could actually defeat the jammers that are sold out there commercially. So he's presenting solutions that could already be defeated. And given getting contraband in, it's like, I think it's £1 billion, criminal enterprise. They've got the money to spend, continuing to defeat theft.
Yeah. Let me just say a thing about the chief inspector. One, I've worked. There's probably only been about half a dozen since the system was set up, and I've worked for about 3 of them. He's probably the best, and he is utterly and completely independent, and I can put my hand on my heart and say he's not being influenced by anybody within the drone sector. His role is about the treatment of and conditions for prisoners, and clearly, the ingress of drugs through drones or any other method has a serious impact. What's missing in the debate, and why I'm so keen to be here, and why I think people talk about Twitter and X. I find it quite useful. I picked up on you through that, and I thought, hey, this is interesting, never heard of these guys before. What there isn't in the public domain, and I do a lot of media, and and the media love it. Drone coming flying over prison, it don't get much sexier than that. Oh well, it does. It's kind of corrupt female prison officers, and there's another myth there. What I'm saying to you in your business, and I'm very keen to hear about Steve, is you've got to get out there, talk to the journalists, because everyone, Charlie Taylor, me, lots of other commentators about prisons, we're flailing in the dark because we know, forgive the French, we know bugger all about drones, other than they're these sexy things that can drop stuff and can, I've got a friend who can fly a drone, and he said to me, it's pretty damn difficult to fly it to a cell and, and put something there. Equally, as a prison governor, unless you come up with some silent and invisible drones, I'd expect my staff to be looking and saying, well, they've dropped something off miraculously at cell C3B on the 2s or whatever. I'd send my staff to that cell, and lots of prisoners aren't getting out of their cells very often, and I'd get the drug. So, but I mean, I know nothing about the technology. I know nothing about the difficulties. So anyone like me or Charlie, if we're commenting on the drone thing, we're doing it in a bit of a vacuum, and I would urge you to get out there, and I can put you in touch with some reliable journalists who are trying to follow this, but they need to be informed, and there's obviously a big thing with Ukraine and drones, but it's not misunderstanding. There is no understanding out there, and I'm delighted to have found you lot, so I can try and edge it out there into the public domain, so we can be better informed. And okay, if the primary source of illicit drugs in prisons is drone, then I want to know. I don't think it is. I think it's staff. I've been at it for 40 years, and that's not to denigrate the entire prison workforce. It's about leadership, training, management, and a whole raft of stuff I can wang on about on another occasion.
Yeah, just so I should add, I wasn't suggesting the chief inspector of prisons was being nefarious in his suggestions. I just think he probably hasn't heard from enough people.
No, exactly.
Drone sector to inform his entire view that.
And I would say to you, knock on his door and say who you are, mention my name. I'm not sure that'll do you any harm or any good or whatever, and say, look, we'd like to talk to you about drone technology. And Steve, I'm sure he'd like to know what was going on and what was stopped. I'm still kind of shocked at the fact that there was anti-drone technology, which has now been terminated.
It wasn't so much anti-drone technology. We'll let Steve jump in a minute. I didn't go in this fully. It was more actually just good old-fashioned policing. I think that's fallen to the wayside. There doesn't seem to be much communication. Actually, I'll just get on this point and then Steve can jump in. There doesn't seem to be much communication and cooperation as there should be between the prison service and the police forces to deal with this. And an interesting example was, and this was a game which had come out of the prison inspections. There was talk about these large drones bringing in, there was claiming 7 kilograms a time drops. But I asked Manchester Police and I said, well, okay, fair enough. How many of these have there been? And they said, we've heard, we've even captured, we have heard of one. And it's that one. And then this was obviously like the headline that was in lots of newspapers: drones bringing in 7-kilogram drops into Manchester. And it's like, well, if you only know of one, how are we saying this is a huge issue?
But remember, they'd heard of it. They
Yes,
didn't have it.
they'd
They'd heard of it.
Yeah,
They
so-
didn't. Someone down the pub said,
Yes.
you know,
It was just, can someone just give us a little bit of proof? That was all. But at this point, I'll let Steve jump in and we can find out how things used to be and maybe what could be learned to say, actually, we need to repeat some of this.
Good evening. How you doing? Thanks very much for the thanks very much for the invite. I'll be honest with you, I don't normally talk in public, so we'll see where this conversation takes me. What do you want to know, Ian? Ask me a question.
Well,
I'll
if you could cover, because obviously you've got experience dealing with this issue specifically, so cover how you dealt with smuggling contraband into prisons, the kind of policing that was done, lessons learned maybe, and what your view is on the situation now, and could that just be reversed?
Yeah, okay. So just to give a little bit about my background, I was a police officer for 30 years. I retired 4 years ago. I am your typical geek, so you are my friends. Before I joined the police, I was an electronics engineer. Used to love taking stuff apart and finding out how things worked and what have you. And that kind of thirst for innovation stuck with me through my policing career. I decided to join or have a career in the police where I'm not only hated by the public, but I'm also hated by my peers. So I was a traffic officer for 16 years, and even doing that kind of role, it was heavily into technology. So wind forward to about 2010. I designed my very first drone, which was based on, at the time, what was RG Pilot, Pixhawk variants. And that kind of gave me an insight to how could these be used for policing in a really positive way. I attended many, tragic road accidents, and roads were closed for hours, whilst we're taking different scene topography and photography and what have you. And I thought, this could be done by a drone a lot more fluidly. So that's kind of where my journey started with drones. And then as that progressed, I ended up sitting on the Home Office steering group as an advisor. Again, by no design. I was one of the early few adopters of this technology, and it was identified that as a geek, I might have hopefully something to offer. Wind forward to about 2014, and we started to see the weaponization of drones out in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's where they, very simply used a form of technology to deliver effect. And that is it. Whether it's a vehicle, drones were a thing. Really cheap, so you could buy a drone for £1,000, which was the early kind of Phantom 2s and 3s, strap a 50mm grenade to it, so for about £1,000 you had almost a reusable missile system, a drop system, so you can go and deliver the payload, drop it, come back, rearm and repeat. It's no great surprise, I don't think, that around that time we started to see drones going into the prisons. And I think it was probably, the tabloids that started to pick up on this at an early stage. I remember there being, quite horrific headlines, and there was deaths that were attributed to it. So there was a job down in London, Wandsworth, I think it was, where somebody had delivered drugs, a payload into the prisons. Police got called. They started to retreat from the prison, got in a vehicle. The guy had his girlfriend with him. They were involved in a very short pursuit through Wandsworth High Street, and the car that they were in hit a bollard, stationary concrete bollard at the side of the road. The car flipped, and the female passenger died. Now, for a headline, that can be quite impactful depending on how the narrative is spelt. I think the Daily Mail was, death drone crash or something along those lines. So I think it's also important to recognise that, this isn't low-level activity. This isn't just a bit of cannabis or a bit of spice. There are tragically people dying as a result of these consequences. And as John says, that differs no more than people, using throwovers or bringing them in. Technology, in my view, gives people access. It gives people ease. And unfortunately, whether, depends which way you look at it. I love drones, clearly, but the technology has advanced so much in such a short period of time that people are able to access that technology even easier to go and buy the drones. The price point has come down. The capability of the aircraft has got better. So the ability to fly them is also dropped. So people can fly them easier as well.
It should be added, though, if I just jump in for a second, that's true for you buying a drone and learning about it. But still, when it comes to dropping stuff into prisons, it still needs somebody that's savvy because they're building bigger self-built.
No, it depends on the weight. So, I mean, typically, we were seeing with the Phantoms, the early Phantoms, that would carry about 1 kilo. Okay, I'm not gonna dive into what the commercial value of that is in the prison, but it's more than the price of the Phantom, I can assure you. So if they were to lose an aircraft that's a commercially available off the shelf one, it's no great loss to them. So what we were typically seeing is when these headlines kind of started around 2014. I was, like I say, a police officer at the time, so I dived into the data because for me, even today, the data is really important because what that'll do is it'll start to allow you to project threats of where they're going because trends change so quickly. And we could see, when certain models of drone were being used and certain mitigations were put in place, we saw almost a reverse in the platforms that criminality was using. And when I use the term criminality, again, that's got quite a broad brush. If you go into, some of the OCGs, the organised crime groups, the clues in the title, they are organised for very good reason.
Seriously well organised.
So, there should be CGs. And unfortunately, their adaptability is a lot more fluid and efficient than perhaps policing, government, and so on. They're not bound by the same legislation, human rights, all these kind of things that policing is often, I'm not going to say restricted against, but certainly will take time to get, RIPA authorities. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, go on. I'll jump in one, but it's just this here. This is the funny bit, and it's for John's benefit as well. Is when he said legislation, because the trouble is, because of the stuff around prisons, what the government reaction always is we will legislate. So what they did was they did a 400-meter or so perimeter around prisons, saying, "Oh, we can't find that; it's illegal." But it was already illegal to drop in the contraband. So we create laws, and it's like, but the criminals won't pay attention to that. Just because you put the law in doesn't stop them breaking laws. So it's always a bit puzzling the reaction.
Yeah, there are a number of points of why we have to go through those routes. Listen, let's be clear. Laws are only created generally reactionary. And they're generally created because of people's inability to apply common sense. Yeah, so, human nature says you shouldn't go and steal something from somebody else. You shouldn't go and burgle their house. You shouldn't drink drive. Well, unfortunately, we can't. Not everybody has the same moral values as other people. So we have to create laws. So laws are only reactionary when new techniques come about. So stuff that we wouldn't have seen. The laws in another 5 years' time are going to be quite different to what we see now. There's probably going to be laws around artificial intelligence and so on and so forth. So laws develop. The reason why certain laws are created in response to flying within an FRZ maybe because there isn't enough evidence to prove other offences. So if a drone was to fly into a prison, for example, and it was caught on the exit route and there was no contraband on it, if they couldn't prove that there was an offence committed in relation to the conveyance of drugs, but they knew that the people were up to no good, they've got to have something in the back pocket almost to say, well, actually, you were still flying over a prison, which is restricted airspace. So, we're going to prosecute you on that. So there are varying degrees of law. So, yeah, I accept what you're saying, Ian, that, flying within an FRZ is a probably low level offence, particularly if there's higher level offences of conspiracy to supply Class A drugs or something like that. So we've got to have a spectrum of laws to be able to apply the most efficient one to that particular case, because they all, you know, all circumstances differ. So going back,
Steve, could I just jump in there about the laws? Let me give you an example and put it all in context. They passed a law a while ago that it's illegal to convey or have in a prison a mobile phone. Okay, with a sentence of up to 2 years. Now they're regularly finding somewhere between 10 and 12,000 mobile phones in prisons every year. I've tried to find how many people are being convicted. Are there 10 to 12,000 convictions of people being in possession of a mobile phone? Answer comes there none. To the best of my knowledge, there's barely a handful of convictions. So as you say, the law is reactive. It's a bit of a, you know, it's kind of emperor's new clothes stuff, isn't it? You know, oh, we have a problem, we'll pass a law. It's not doing anything to solve the problem.
I'm glad you brought up that example. Well, just to jump in 1 second. For me, a lot of the drone problem, the root cause to it is the mobile phone, because you'd be having that conversation first saying, I need this, and this is where it needs to be dropped at this time. And I think if we tackled that, it also deals with the drone issue. And this was one of my questions as well, which I didn't really get an answer to, which I put to the prison inspectorate, was because when they're talking about using jammers and that, it's like, well, hang on a minute, why aren't we suggesting there's IMSI captures? So an IMSI capture puts up essentially a fake cell site and the phone connects to it. And then apparently with some systems, they can tell you which cell that mobile phone is in.
Yeah,
and I think you can even track some of the communication backwards and forwards. So you can see who's being talked to, and then you could actually start doing arrests. And I just don't understand why we deal with the problems kind of at the end of the chain rather than, you know, getting them earlier on, as it were.
What I was going to jump in and ask, because you're mentioning cell phones. Just, you don't have to answer this, a bit sensitive, but to a layman, I mean, I understand drugs are quite expensive, and you know, delivering by drone is perhaps a way. But is it really just drugs that they're delivering? Surely a cell phone and other things might be more important. You know, in if you're going to go to that effort of delivering via a drone, which isn't as straightforward as people think, are drugs really the number one thing to, you know, the best bang for buck for your delivery?
Yeah, I personally saw a whole range of things going in. So it was from, you know, drugs, miniature mobile phones, the sort of Mars bar sized ones, USB charging cables, battery packs, you know, SIM cards, because they're extremely light, so they can go in on bulk. So, you know, whilst drugs is part of the problem, but also what you've got to consider, and I think there is a number of problems that fit into all this, and I don't think we're going to solve them all in one evening. But you know, you've got resourcing within the prisons, the financial burdens that they're under, as well as policing. You know, I think everything's at an all-time low at the moment with regards to that. So, you know, there isn't one simple solution. If there was, then I'm sure that they would do it. But you know, when you look at some of the stuff that John was talking about, particularly around figures, and that's something I want to dive into a little bit, because the figures should be there because they are available. So some of the stuff that I did 2014-15, you know, I went and got 10 drones. I developed various digital forensic techniques to extract data from the aircraft, and at that time that was incredibly new. So I remember from 10 drones, just a small sample, that 10 drones, each one on average did about 50 flights. So although you got 10 drones, there's about 500 flights there that are attributable towards prisons. So whilst the sightings over the last few years have quadrupled, and they are quite horrific. I mean, if you look back, so the project that I led was 2014 to about 2019. We saw a reduction of about 80%. Okay, that was without any budget or very minimal budget. There was 4 or 5 of us looking after the UK nationally for drones going into prisons. Okay, so resourcing was really tight. It was really low, but we saw an 80% reduction. Why? Because we were relying on key data. And again, I'm not going to go into that, but that key data that we were extrapolating allowed us to target the key people that were doing the majority of the work. So when you look at OCGs, you know, if there's, you know, the figures from this year from the prison inspectorate and various FOIs say between 2014 March 2025 to last year, there's been 1,712 sightings. Now, again, going on to what you said, Ian, you know, okay, some of that could be crude aviation, you know, mass, whatever it might be. Within that, there's going to be a number of recoveries. So I think a way to represent the data would be, okay, let's give it 3 columns. How many recoveries have we had within the prison estates? Because that is a tangible number, isn't it? If they've recovered 10, 20, 30, whatever it is, how many recoveries? From that, how many have been confirmed as incursions? Because on board those, a majority of those aircraft is going to be data. And from that data, you can show, well, the drone took off from outside, flew in, and then flew back out again. So you've got that conveyance route. So whilst the figures are really bad, in my opinion, you know, 1,712, bear in mind in 2019, that was almost down to single figures because we were just doing something that was quite unique and we was, to term a phrase, attacking the network. That 1,712, a correlation of that is going to be confirmed flights into prisons. Based on previous figures, it wouldn't surprise me if that is at least 10 times greater.
So to just jump in at this point, it sounds to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong for what I'm thinking here, but it sounded to me like we've kind of lost what your team was doing as a national level team, just focusing on this issue where you could go across the country and tackle the people that were behind this. And that's probably dropped off completely. And it's probably been left to local forces that have got so much else to do. They don't even respond to it and it doesn't get tackled at all. Do you think that's right?
I think that's a fair point. So certainly from, you know, a national perspective, all the drones that were being recovered almost came to a single pinch point, which was myself and my team. So every time a drone was recovered, we got notified on it, and we were able to react quite agile. So, you know, we got onto the aircraft, we extracted what we could from it. The digital forensics and everything was a priority because wet forensics can take some time. So why would you necessarily wait for that when you've got some earlier and better wins to get some, you know, get some ones and zeros out of the aircraft? And that allowed us to basically get on top of, you know, some of the trends. So if we did see that peak in trends at a particular prison or a particular type of drone being used, then we would be in a position to target that. Bearing in mind, back then, there wasn't that many drones available, as in commercial off-the-shelf systems. We were limited in our numbers. So, you know, the area of focus was quite narrow. What's happened since then, and particularly Ukraine, again, not going to dive into that too much, but we've seen within a theatre of war how quickly innovation can actually adapt. Yeah, war being the mother of innovation. We see it on YouTube, you know, as people like ourselves talking on these channels. So it doesn't take a bright spark to sit down and think, right, how do I build a heavy lift drone? Look at H&R drone racing, right? Pixel motors, you know, whatever it might be. And also some of the other, you know, techniques that they're using. I don't think it will be long before we start seeing fiber optic in the UK as a method of flying the drones into, you know, prisons and what have you.
I should add with that, you could buy the entire kit, you know.
Oh yeah, 100%.
The thing, and you know, so it isn't rocket.
No.
Yeah.
It's not drone science. The availability of this through some of the online retailers and everything, and that goes back to what I was saying earlier. The access to this technology now, where probably 10 years ago people would be turning to the geeks, and there probably wasn't that many of them, particularly to convert them into criminality. Now with the likes of YouTube and online resources,
Average Joe.
You were sorry.
What you're saying is average Joe can do it, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, very, very easily. And I'm in my 50s now, but there's, teenagers and a lot younger people that are growing up with this technology. This isn't new to them. You think about the gaming generation. We had joysticks and all the rest of it. So the dexterity to fly an aircraft is not dissimilar to playing, on a PlayStation. So people are, I'm not saying they're being born with these skills, but certainly the flash to bang where they're being able to just pick up this technology. You give an iPad to a 3-year-old, it's intuitive. They know how to use it. I think that same transference of skill has now happened to the younger generation where they can pick up a drone, go, even some of the senior people where, I come and, oh no, I don't want to touch a drone. They're far too complicated. Within 10 minutes, they're flying it. And they go, didn't realize it was this, that hard. So getting stuff into, didn't get that one. Go on. Prison drops. Aros. Yeah, okay. Sorry, I thought the Rus was Russia, but yeah, Aros.
So did I. So did I. Didn't get that either.
Yeah. But again, you just, they're and I've seen it on open source, it is available. There is people that will openly go and recruit pilots, drone operators to go and conduct this activity for them. So like I say, for me, I think there is a lot more that can be done. Throwing money at it, I don't think personally is the single solution. Counter UAS equipment is part of that, but again, that can be expensive if you consider, there's 140 odd prisons in the UK. I don't know if a typical system costs £100,000. That's a lot, but we've got to start somewhere. What I think has happened is we've perhaps lost focus a little bit on what can be done and sometimes how easy that can be achieved. Just by looking at the data, because I think it's all there.
Yeah, I know there's money being put in recently, and really where it needs to be is physical countermeasures. Now, there's this one where John can probably jump in. I suspect there's older prisons where some of this might be a little bit more difficult or a little bit more expensive, but there was a prison up in Scotland where they effectively upgraded all the bars on the windows to be anti drone. Essentially whoever devised them, I just thought this would be more practical for stopping drones. And after 6 months, they hadn't had a single drone drop, and I assume that's still continuing on. So that's an exceptional record, and so I'm glad that's been talked about more. And I think that's really where it should be first: is try and do things physically, and rather than this, let's try and zap drones out of the sky. That concerns me at many levels. I still think it should be detect, have the awareness of where they are and where the pilot is.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I often read, the prison service bringing, they're talking about using AI around probation, and it's all got a role. But these things are tool. It's the prisons are the people business, and drugs are a real problem. And I've done the back of a fag packet calculation on the basis that no one else has done it, and said, what's the value of drugs in prison, given that they're 2, 3, 4 times the price they are on the outside? There's a £1 billion industry there. Now, as Steve's been, saying quite explicitly, this is about serious organised crime, seriously well organised in prison. If you haven't seen the Sunday Times expose from this last Sunday by Gabriel Pogrund and David Shipley, this is a corruption expose, going to very senior ranks in the prison service. So what we need to do is not just sort of throw some money wildly at it, but with serious organised crime, there are key players within prisons who are coordinating the drones, coordinating the drops, coordinating the pickups, coordinating the distribution. And I could go into any prison tomorrow, and by lunchtime, I'll tell you who they are. They're not difficult to spot. We live under this naive assumption that the National Crime Agency are out there catching these serious villains, making zillions out there. They arrest them and they put in the prison. Oh, they'll stop offending. No, they don't. It's a different business model, and within that different business model, it's corrupt staff, and they are using drones. But, people say to me, how do you stop drugs getting into prison? Well, you stop prisoners wanting them. Now, that might sound a bit stupid, but, if you're locked up in what is effectively a cell the size of a car park space with someone you've never met for 23 hours, I'd quite like a mind-altering substance to get through the day. And Charlie Taylor, talks regularly about prisoners spending hours and hours in their cell. There's a lot of self-medication going on around that. But, when there are some key players out there, prisoners, I don't know if you've noticed, prisoners don't, apart from Daniel Khalifi, you get the odd nutter who will escape. But by and large, prisoners don't escape. Why not? Well, we're in a digital world. You can't survive off grid. So, and you read this article, what a lot of prisoners are doing is making a lot of money in prison, manufacturing their way through the system to get out at the earliest possible opportunity. I knew one guy, and I wrote about it in my book, while he was in prison, he bought a holiday home and sent his daughter through university. What's kind of not to like? From a criminal perspective. So, we do pick on these, these issues like drones, and there's a lot around about, female prison officers and, well, that, we shouldn't have any women in prison. We shouldn't be doing that. Yes, there are problems with drones. There are problems with female prison officers, but there's also problems with leadership and management. And a big issue, and Steve will probably relate to that, one of the things, I've worked with the NCA, I've worked with the Met, I've worked with, special branch. These issues are solved if you've got good, positive relationships between the prison service and law enforcement. The prison service doesn't see itself as a law enforcement agency. Kind of I did, and I think it should. But the drone thing is a symptom of a wider issue. But I would urge you, people need to be informed. Charlie Taylor needs to be informed. And if Steve's saying there were mitigations, they were successful, for whatever reason they're not being used now, we need those questions. And the prison service are great at security, yet we don't know, we don't count, we're not that clever. They haven't got the data, they're embarrassed because they haven't got the data, and it's up to ministers to say, well, why haven't you got the data? So it's a wide and a complex problem, but drones are part of the problem, but it goes much further than that. And again, you read this article in the Sunday Times. It talks about a prison service rotten to the core. Well, you need to deal with that, not just slag off everything to do with drones.
Yeah, I read that. It was quite shocking because you had a senior member of the prison service that was seeing that serious criminals were being sent to open prisons, so they could essentially have an easy life, get to see the family, and get out.
Yeah, so what I've christened accelerated promotion.
Yes, and it seemed to be that a lot of kind of partner agencies could see this going on and knowing it was wrong, and were telling the prison service, and it was falling on deaf ears. It just seemed bonkers.
It's all part of a bigger machine, isn't it? And, anything like this is counter UAS, I see as an onion. It's got many layers. What you apply to one system might not necessarily work in another. But as long as you understand the basics and you build on that, then you can start to achieve. So, drones can't be solved on their own without solving, corruption, without solving finances, without solving resources, without solving information and intelligence sharing, without having, analytics analysis talking to each other, all these sort of things. There is so many moving parts to it that if you concentrate on one, the problem will just shift.
But it's not all counter UAS. Surely is just buying a big thing and go pew pew and shoot the shoot the drone out of the sky. So really,
He
it's
says
almost
with
that
tongue in cheek.
you're where you're coming from is from a genuine knowledge of the system, of the perhaps not so much the prison system, but of how these people work and things. So to call what you bring to the party counter UAS, I think would be a little bit wrong, because I think most of us associate counter UAS with real snake oil salesmen, boxes of flashing lights and wizardry that just does not work. And there are so many ways of defeating it, and so many ways of flying in. If you know anything about the drone industry, you know how to get around all these things that are being sold for an awful lot of money. So, I would argue you shouldn't say counter UAS. You have a different skill set, a much better skill set.
I would say
I think
I think that there has to be better knowledge. There has to be better, better advice. Unfortunately, we do have people who do call themselves consultants who are doing this job and giving the wrong information, or giving the information which is benefiting other people, rather than people who are out there flying every day. I'm now in a sense classed as a consultant, but I call myself.
Yeah, I thought so. You had that look of it. You have that look. Yes,
I have, but it's more because we're doing this stuff every day. We are flying every day. We are actually encountering all the problems, and we're trying to find ways to beat those problems. But it's got nothing to. I don't call myself a consultant. I run a business. We do lots of flights. People come to us for advice. But we don't advertise ourselves like that. I think this is what's wrong, is that there are lots of people, and I know people out there who call themselves consultants, who have got absolutely no knowledge of everyday interactions, what it's like to fly. I was just chatting with Simon Strickland there, and we're talking about things that we are experiencing every day. These consultants don't experience that, so they're giving not just the wrong information, but they're not even seeing what is happening on every day, and what's happening in the prisons, kind of, or what's not happening in a sense, is very much reflected on what we do as a community from companies that are out there. And it really annoys me when I see these consultants go out there and all they do is wear suits, and you never see them flying a drone, or if they do have a drone, it's an old Phantom 4 that they're holding from years and years ago.
That sounds like an old boss.
I know. It really riles me. I'll shut
I think
up.
one of the problems with that is that there's no checks and balances, is it? So anybody can call themselves a consultant, that they give advice. So I think it's down to people that want to employ those consultants, so that they actually go away and do their due diligence and ask what their background is. Why should I be using you as opposed to somebody else, and actually drilling into the weeds to see whether the advice they're offering is, can stand up to scrutiny. I'm still of that old fashion that, I'm used to giving evidence in court. So, I like, that is my end goal. That is my kind of standard, that if I had to say something in front of a judge and jury, then I can stand by my convictions as an expert. But you're right, but that's money, isn't it? That's where money comes from. And from what you're saying, Gary, that, a lot of people look at the equipment. So I see counter UAS. I think that is the right phrase. I get where you're coming from. Counter fraud, counter intelligence, counter corruption. It fits. Counter drone. It does fit. But I think people need to be mindful of that. Counter drone isn't just about equipment. If you know that there's a drone in your airspace, why have you got counter UAS? If you've got some hardware, the reason you've got that is because there's drones in your airspace. Right. Once you've got it, what's downstream? How are you now going to deal with that? How are you going to assess the threat? How are you going to respond? So for me, a lot of people come at it, and I get people coming to me saying, we need some counter UAS equipment, some detection equipment. I'll always ask the question, why? Why do you think you need it? Well, we got a problem. Right, scale back from that. What problem have you got? Start to understand the problem, because sometimes there's soft mitigations you can put in place. There's other things that you can do where you don't have to go out and spend 250, 100,000 pounds on some equipment. But a vendor will not give them that advice because they want to sell the equipment. So that's
I'm
why
clarified that, Steve, because again, my mind was the same as Gary when you said counter UAS. I was thinking kit. It makes me ship.
I wasn't. No, but I was listening to what Steve was saying, and his plane was intelligence based and all that sort of thing. So I wouldn't put what he brings to the party in the same sentence.
You're saying it needs a more glorified, complete title of what it is, because
it's terminology.
It does sound like systems.
Yeah, 10 years ago, if you said to somebody the word drone, I think the majority of people would automatically think Reaper, Predator, whatever it is. That was 10 years ago. Now, you say to people drone, they don't think about Reapers and Predators. They automatically think of, probably a White Phantom or, a commercially available off-the-shelf system. So, minds change, terminology changes. Like I say, counter UAS for me, and always has been, multi-layered. It depends what you can have a remote ID sensor. Well, that can be part of your counter UAS strategy. That might be all you need, all the way up to full radar with effectors and everything else. So it is a suite of options.
Well, it's interesting that you said, well, what's going to happen down the line? You detect the thing. Well, what's going to happen next? What is the process? Now, you're probably not aware, but I'm in Africa. I'm in South Africa, and we have so the whole world comes here to sell us anti-poaching stuff, and it's exactly the same thing, because it's all great. You can have the greatest system in the world, but if there's no one to call to go and do something about the poaching, then there's no point in having all this gear. And the same with deliveries, drone deliveries here. We've done, a friend and I, we've done some cleanup work of some jobs where some people, well, they're from America, they came and said, oh, we're going to do this delivery job, and the charging of the batteries demanded all the power that was available on an island. They've come with a Western mindset, it's like, we're going to do this, hooray! And no, that's the entire island's power. You'll need to charge that up for 1 hour's flight. So
it sounds like the Tesla truck.
So again, the truck.
The truck from Tesla.
Yeah.
It charges like the whole city just to make one truck.
Within law enforcement, it's, and I said, what I kind of hit upon there was about court. That is the end goal. So from an investigation, an early offence, all the way through the court process, that is where you want to get to prosecute somebody. And every link in that chain is incredibly important and intricate. If there is ever a break in that chain for whatever reason, then it's going to potentially get kicked out of court. And that, again, I'm not going to drill into it too much, but again, if, let's say, for example, a drone is recovered in the prison. Yeah, it's recovered in the prison. It's got a massive payload underneath it. It's got £500,000 worth of drugs, blah, 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 blah. Absolutely brilliant. If that recovery isn't done in a necessarily forensic way, as in the prison service haven't been trained how to forensically recover it, and they just put it in a carrier bag, it's handed over to police, the continuity of evidence chain breaks down. It doesn't matter what evidence you get at the end of that is already potentially compromised. So what I'm saying is this whole piece of, cradle to grave, the most simplistic parts can break that chain. And like I say, I'm not under any illusion that policing at the moment is, on its knees. I think we see that in the press. They're losing police officers, experienced police officers, and career police officers. They're leaving after 15, 20 years because there's other lives out there. I'm lucky I reached the end and was able to draw my pension, but I know people that haven't. And so resourcing is going down, so there's a lot of pressure on the prison service, policing, to get this right. But I genuinely still think even now there is a lot more that can be done through stuff that we've learned, that we know worked, just reapply it. But
Yes,
I'm
Steve,
not in that position.
what you were saying about drones and cradle, I mean, was always the case with mobile phones, you know.
Yeah.
And part of the problem, you find 12,000 mobile phones, that's a shed load of data. And the knowledge, the skills, the experience, and the technology wasn't there. I'm told, you know, I'm out of the loop operationally these days, that, you know, they are now beginning to use AI for that. You know, you download a mobile phone, you know, you want to know everything about the numbers and about the text, you know, and relate that to all the other data you've got. But it wasn't done. You know, there was a huge amount of data that was just being ignored. And, you know, there's a huge amount of data with, you know, with the drug fine, you know, with cannabis, with, you know, because, you know, I know it's an organization called The Loop, you know, and they go to festivals, you know, and they will get some of the drugs that are being sort of bought and sold around the festivals, and they'll analyze it. You know, has it got nitazines in it? Has it got spice in it? You know, where might it have come from? You know, there's a whole raft of stuff you can do, but the prison service doesn't do it.
But well, what do I want to say to this? Well, just even like these simple SDRs, I'm sure Steve knows about them. The amount of data analyzing you can do from digital signals now is absolutely quite incredible. So signals intelligence would definitely be top of my list of a thing to have around a prison and stuff. And we know who is using this sort of thing. It's organised crime, but then they've got all the money, haven't they? So they can afford to do it all.
That's the irony, Gary. And some of the training that I do, I make reference to OCGs and what have you. And unfortunately, as we said, you know, sometimes they are better organised. They're more agile, more innovative because they've got to be, and they're better financed. You know, the risk is probably greater, but you know that can pay off, unfortunately, and we need to get ahead of that curve. And I think that's where we were in 2019. But you know, when I read the figures and I see them year on year quadrupling, I'm sorry, but somebody has to ask, why has that happened?
But you must have
it's a bit of a cliche. It's a cliche phrase, but you know, we have an analog prison service in a digital world.
Yeah.
Well, that can be said about a lot of things. We say that about safety in the sky against general aviation and normal stuff. It's an analog sky with the drones are digital devices, native digital devices that don't fit in there as well as they should. Bruce, you've been very quiet, and you must be now. I've put you next to H&R drone racing there because obviously you must be neighbours, both being in New Zealand. They can't be. They live down the end of the street or something.
I think I can see them from here.
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah, I reckon.
My apologies for being late.
Yes,
I had trouble I had trouble with microphone last week, and when I plugged it in today, it decided it was going to let out magic smoke and do all sorts of stuff. So I had to actually do a running repair. Had to repair it before I could come online.
Good man. You're normally quite vocal about all this sort of things and rules and regulations, and you're just sitting there very quietly.
No. I'm a great fan of overregulation. Keeps everybody placid and quiet.
But it strikes me that we've not been arguing or fighting about a drone site or a prison site or a police site. It just strikes me that what's missing from this conversation is what's probably the only way the conversations have been happening has been vendors have been trying to get in and tell people the news. And Mads Tech saying fire. Ian, of course, is the king of releasing smoke and creating fires from USBs. We all know that. But so how does the drone industry formally communicate?
He's gone to sleep.
We've lost Gary. He's frozen.
Whoops.
Oh, thank goodness for that. He was going on, wasn't he? Yeah.
Somebody give him a nudge.
Yeah, you're closest down.
He's gone analog.
He's probably just
damn. I want my money back.
The funny thing about that one is, whilst your pictures all went away, I could still hear you.
No, you were saying, Gary.
I don't know what I was saying. I was just saying, how do we get the right grown-ups in the room is what I'm saying. And the more I grow up, the less I understand the world. I really don't understand how things get lost in the post or in communication or whatever. It just seems a pity that the drone industry should be talking to the prison services and the police service, saying, "Hey, what can we do? How can we help? What is your problem? How can we help mitigate your problems?" And these things just don't happen.
I don't think it's a drone community problem. I really don't, because I think the majority of lawful drone operators, they will act lawfully. It's like asking the motoring public to solve drink driving issues or people that crash. It's not down to the general public to do that. It is down to government strategies, legislation, and having access to the right kind of information and data to be able to target.
But Steve, you know how this is going with the press, and of course we're going to be talking. Obviously, we all get tarred with the same brush. So when something negative comes out, and of course we're going back to the press again, but when something negative comes out, it affects everyone.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah,
but I would just say that on in terms of the communication thing. I mean, there are a lot of so-called journalists out there that wouldn't give the time of day, but equally there are some very, very good journalists out there, and journalists want stories, and the Sunday Times thing was absolutely superb. I've done a lot around corruption with Channel 4 News, superb station, and they are after information and they want to tell a story and they want to inform the public, and I think there are some really good journalists out there that really want to solve the problem,
John,
and they want to.
Do the public want to hear the common sense truth, or do they want to have all the clickbait and all the fancy headlines and
what sells, Steve? What sells? That is the way the press is.
The truth is, I don't think all the public do want the clickbait, but the trouble is with the funding of news, it's kind of all a bit broken down because people don't want to pay for the content.
Exactly,
which is the problem. So we don't have the proper, decent investigative journalism. The stuff you've mentioned for that recent story is the exception. Channel 4 dispatches, again, it's the exception. I do worry about the future, actually. That I really wish there was kind of a bit of a government strategy about all that money we give to the BBC. I think probably a section of it should be sort of ring fenced off and given out to newspapers, everything around the country. You do something to make. I think
they spend most of it managing scandal.
What's that? Sorry,
they spend most of it managing the scandals, don't they?
Probably.
I think
I would like to see just more quality journalism.
What I see is
even I'm the same.
Over a number of years, I just was going to say, over a number of years, I've seen headlines focusing on the word drone, not the people that operate it. You don't get the same thing in other walks of life. You don't say, with regards to vehicles, you don't blame the vehicle because it hit a pedestrian. You blame the driver because they're the person that's driving the car. I think the focus perhaps needs to shift away slightly from the machinery that's being used, because all it is a vehicle of conveyance, isn't it? Yeah, that's all it is. It's the operator at the end of it. So again, when we talk about drones, drones are killing people, they're delivering drugs. No, it's not the drone. Yes, the drone is delivering the drug, but that's just a method of transport. It's the person at the end of the controller. They're the person that's delivering the drug.
They're all wearing shoes.
But until that, until the press kind of focus away from that narrative, it's always going to sell, because drones are, it is a buzzword. It is what it is.
And probably what John was saying there about the article in the Times, which was really good, which I'm guessing was probably behind a paywall, so not many people would have seen it. So only a select few would have actually seen that, but not let's say the general public. So again, as much as it's the Daily Mail, it's the Sun, it's all the crap ones that are not really behind the paywall. and that's the ones that people read. That's the ones that get.
But I think and I will try and take a little bit of credit for it. Steve will be aware of this. You go back probably only 5 years ago, and we weren't talking about there was serious organized crime out there, but we weren't talking about OCGs in prison. We weren't talking about the drug economy. One thing that was mentioned in the Sunday Times article, which I was pleased on, and I've been banging about for a long time, is the word "the corruptor." We often talk about the corrupted prison officers, but these serious organized criminals that are being arrested and getting 15, 20 years, who are changing their business model, they're not your, ne'er-do-well of Plumstead. They are serious organized criminals. They change their working methods. They change their business model, but they're not being managed, and, I could tell you things about that article. I'd be saying, okay, well, what wasn't happening with these individuals, but, the narrative is changing around there. But I think, and, I'm delighted to have, come across this community, and I've been, waxing lyrical about prison corruption. I've touched on drones and clearly have no idea what I'm talking about. You are a community here that I think, I would be urging you, to get out there with a narrative. And, even the Daily Mail, God bless it's cotton socks, they want a story. And, if it's a good, decent story, if there is something there around, drone mitigations not being used, then that's a huge story. And because you are informed, because the area, because the business, I can put you in touch with some very, very good journalists, who really want to make a difference. Yes, they want to sell newspapers, and we're investigative journalism. You're absolutely right. But how much do any of us, on these screens, how much do we pay a year for our journalism? It's not a lot, really. And things are behind paywalls because we don't pay to get behind the paywalls. We'll pay.
It's interesting.
We'll pay our subscription for Disney, but not for the Guardian.
No, not Disney. No, they won't let me share passwords. I'm not paying anything to them. But as someone who was sort of instrumental in the early shift from the printed media to the online media, I had a news organization back in the late 1990s. And I saw this coming because we've seen such a dramatic shift in the way we communicate information. We're no longer, in the old days, it was a newspaper and we had a small team of journalists communicating with all the population. Now we've got all the population directly communicating with all the population. You've got citizens, journalists, and the mainstream media have, unfortunately, out of necessity, abandoned the tenets of the Fourth Estate. We've got really poor journalism as the norm. We've got clickbait headlines. We've got it's more about publishing drama than fact, and this is basically devalued news as a commodity. And the few that are left trying to, retain those principles of the Fourth Estate are simply shouted out of existence by the rest, the Daily Mail and such. And also they can't make any money because people are getting all this lovely drama for free supported by advertising. It needs a complete change of the way we deal with gathering our news. And what I've seen recently, of course, is that we're seeing a lot of citizen journalists out there with their phones, live streaming in rallies and things, and actually showing us what's happening on the spot at the moment in time, uncorrupted by editorial influence. Because if a policeman arrests somebody, that happened. You're not faking it. It's not AI yet. And this has changed the whole way people are looking at news and the whole way they're consuming it and the whole way it's being manufactured and delivered. And we've got to realize that it's not 1980 anymore. That we have to, when we're coming up with a counter narrative, we've got to address that through the same channels. I'm very, very active in pushing back against this, the narrative as applied to drones. Drones are evil. Drones are spying on your children. Drones are, all this sort of stuff. And for the reasons that Steve gave, a drone is just an instrument, it's just a tool. I bet you all these people that do bad things are wearing shoes. So we should ban shoes and nothing bad would ever happen. That seems to be the attitude of politicians who don't have a full pack of sandwiches in their lunch. They don't understand. They use the blunt weapons. Let's legislate. My goodness, people are breaking the law. Let's make more laws. Let's make the punishment harsher. That'll fix it. And that's why even in countries with capital punishment, you still get murder. You still get all these crimes. People don't care. We've got to be clever, box clever. And I spend so much time trying to push back. But as a community, speaking from John's perspective, we are a community, but we're a very loose-knit community. We don't don't have any cohesiveness when it comes to reversing this narrative. We're a bunch of individuals, and as such, divide and conquer. It's very hard to do anything.
Yeah, I would just add on your mention of citizen journalism. That works in certain scenarios, like you say, if something's going on live, it's great, but there isn't the replacement in the citizen space for proper investigative journalism. We still need to work out a way, and I don't suggest I have the answer for it, other than that, some state funding behind it to keep it alive, because it's the only way I can see it, because I just know people won't pay for it. I mean, even if you put it in video form, you'd still struggle to get people to pay for it.
State funding laws introduced the concept of bias, though, and there are some really good independent citizen journalists out there who do the investigative journalism, and they've got YouTube channels.
You can only go so far as a citizen. A proper journalist.
Look how far you go, mate. Look how far you go. You're just a citizen, and you do all the FOIAs and everything. You get right to the bottom of things. You're the proof that citizens can actually get to the root cause of things and examine and expose the facts. And plenty more others are doing it too.
Well, I just don't think it's a replacement for it. But I see a bit with me doing the freedom of information as a bit of a frustration for the fact I look at journalists, and I think there's journalists out there that would want to do that, but because they're being pushed into doing clickbait stories, the editors want them to do a quick story. You're not allowed to spend 12 months chasing the Freedom of Information Act because it works so slowly, and there's that much evasion that it just doesn't get done at all now. So we are unfortunately in a situation where that's all a bit broken, and I fear for the future a bit with that, because I don't want us as societies to lose that, both in America and here in the UK and further afield. Proper, decent investigative journalism has done so much good, and I still mention it to this day that like a few exceptions, like I wouldn't say their entire content is perfect, but the majority of stuff Dispatches do on Channel 4, it's really good quality stuff, and I'd fear losing that kind of thing. I would have said 60 Minutes in America, but I've realised that actually is really quite poor. The drone piece they did was shocking. And then I went back and started looking at stuff. They actually did a Dungeons and Dragons story back at the time of that, saying kids could summon demons. And I thought, that's exactly what they've just done with drones in 2024.
So, Ian, are you saying the media has changed dramatically since Gatwick?
No.
Well, there you go. You've just shut yourself down.
I must admit, I do worry about the phrase citizen journalism. I mean, there's a lot of citizen noise out there. And I go back to the Sunday Times article. Now I know that was in gestation for many months. When I read that, I just realised the amount of work that went on. You go to the phone hacking scandal, the Guardian. And that was years and years of work, and that was, fighting against another bit of the media, which was Murdoch. It was the Guardian, the phone hacking scandal that closed down the news of the world. So sometimes the good media has to fight with some of the mainstream media, but good journalism, I've written bits and pieces, and if you work with an editor, you've got to write something in 800 words. That's hugely difficult. And a good editor will make you think, what are you trying to say, and how are you trying to say it? I'm a great fan of podcasts, but 95% of the podcasts around are just banal crap noise, people giggling at each other.
Well, hey, welcome.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. We are generally banal nonsense.
But the thing we need above all is to teach people the process of critical thinking, because when you've got this massive information, you need to be able to think critically and determine for yourself which is right and which is wrong, and you can do it. All the resources are at our fingertips. As long as you're over 18, no problems.
Well, I'll give you an example about a friend of mine. He was the principal of an Oxford college. And he was talking to these are undergraduates at Oxford, and he said to them in this sort of class about media, he said, where do you all get your news from? And they said, Facebook. They were all getting their, and he said to them, so where does Facebook get their news from? and they looked at him as if he was stupid. They did not know what he was talking about. So this so-called news, where is it coming from? Where is this? And we, for me, I would have, media studies in schools, in universities has got a bad rap. I'd make media studies part of the core curriculum. If you think what a young person needs most in this current world, it's an understanding of how the media works. And we don't do that.
That's changing rapidly, because pretty soon now, when you go and get your news, you won't get news from the news source. You get an AI summary tailored specifically to your interests and things. And AI, I've been working a lot with AI recently, and it gets things wrong so often, but it does it with such amazing confidence that if you use that as your source of news, you're going to be massively disinformed.
Well, AI is a perfect bullshitter. Yes,
absolutely. The critical thinking that's spot on, and then to be able to read for comprehension and understanding, and enjoy reading, sit back and look at the past. Well, I've mentioned the Georgia who controls the past, controls the future, but read, have a solid knowledge from established, trusted sources. That's going to be very important in youngsters' lives.
Why is TikTok so successful? Because it's in, I don't know, 30-second bursts. We are pandering to the worst spans of concentration.
And I'm a really good dancer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It doesn't make as much money as your OnlyFans, so that's the other thing.
That's my main income source. Yep.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, we're living in a funny time. And then
the thing is, we can solve all the world's problems here. We're underappreciated. What's our consulting rate, Gary?
What's our consulting rate? Absolutely. These two youngsters up in the corner. It's their world. We'll all be gone. It's their world that's going to hell in a handcart.
Look what we're leaving them. My God.
We always thought it was, when we were, we're adults now, but when we were little, we always thought the world would have been a bit more like the Jetsons.
Yeah, flying cars. Who thought that'll happen? Won't it? Flying cars. E-hang is the future.
Should I actually do some drone news before we go? We've been going look for an hour and a half. It's been a really great.
No, it's all about drama, Gary. Drama is the future, mate.
Drama. So we can need to get this right. Getting serious and drama and stuff and
suspense.
It's the there's only a couple of things that I really saw that really interested me this week. This one is quite interesting. This multirotor flying for 3 hours. It's a helicopter, really. It's got articulated blades up there, but that's quite a useful. I'm not sure if it tells us here what the payload was. £10, for 2 hours. That's not bad. It'll be interesting to see what happens to that.
What's that going to do over one of those eVTOL hybrid things? How is that going to be better than one of those?
Well, it's simple. It's small. It's electric. It's not a
but electric eVTOLs. I mean, you've got those.
Yeah,
the fixed wings with the props and things.
Yeah. Well,
Wing use them for delivery.
There's a market for it.
I was just saying that there's an ambulance coming to New Zealand, electric VTOL configuration.
Really?
Yeah, even way over here.
Even way over there. Well, it's probably one of Bruce's.
How's our New Zealand jetpack going? Oops.
Quite so.
We actually met that guy. Years and years ago when he was doing his presentations. Yeah, we actually met him. Yeah. It didn't really take off, did it? It didn't really take off.
We'll see what you did there.
Yes, what you did.
But the simulation looked pretty cool when he had it on this display.
Yeah.
The
promo girls were always good to talk to.
Yeah.
Oh, well,
and Trevor Rogers said that diesel-powered helicopter was going to rescue people off Everest. New Zealand's full of innovators, using the word very loosely.
And this is talking about innovation. This is how to reinvent the Islander. I don't quite understand these guys. Okay, normally aspirated, so they've reinvented the Islander. Well done, very good. And then this is Teal versus Vector is going to be a big thing in the American drone space because it's all about stealing IP when you move from one company to another. And this lawsuit is going to be one to watch. If Teal succeed, a lot of these pop-up American, we've been given loads of money to to make stuff to copy Ukraine, it's going to start falling apart. So people watch this, and that's here endeth the lesson. That's the things that really caught my attention this week. Okay, and to suspect the two large blades. Yes, that's exactly what happens. Two of them are auto-rotating. So it's an auto gyro, but using two of them powered.
It's the worst of all worlds. Yeah.
It is the worst. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, but I mean, they seem to be doing quite well if they can drag it around for 2 hours. I mean, that's with £10 payload.
But we've been told hydrogen fuel is the future. That'll go for weeks.
Oh, hydrogen. No. Don't get me angry about
like
hydrogen.
little Nelly, right, from 007. Jared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The high. I happen to know somebody that is working on a hydrogen system this very week. But man. with that, so is anyone else? We've kept everyone here for a very long time, and it's such an interesting topic. That we need to do more
with the final thing. If John,
here we go.
At the end of this, just reply an email to Steve and me with the journalist he recommends. That would be really handy, so that if we're trying to reach out for something in future, we know who to chat to. Because
sure.
There were times when we've got. I mean, I don't know if you'd have spotted it or not, but we actually managed to sort of help nudge along the truth for a claimed drone incident over in Lakenheath that turned out to be an F-15 fighter. But that was one of the very few things where we've actually managed. That was the BBC that helped with that. But that's one of the few times we've been able to sort of get the ear of a credible journalist, and it'd be good to be able to do so more often. And I think if you could put Steve in with the touch with the Chief Inspector of Prisons as well, that might not be a bad idea, because I'm sure he's got plenty of good ideas to pass on.
Yeah, he'd want to listen.
Well, that's cool. And we'll send Bruce. That's what we'll do. We'll send Bruce to be there. I just wanted to put this into Simon. I can't remember if Simon got to hear this. On the 4th of September, Simon Strickland, School on a Pub Night, the Fleece in Richmond. There's going to be a little bit of
I don't think Simon can make it now, unfortunately. I think he's got some other on at the time, unfortunately. But
well, if anyone else is around in the UK, the other Ian will be there. This Ian won't be there because we deliberately timed it so it won't be there. Maybe Stephen will be there as well. And we look forward to meeting all them. We'll probably do a live stream from that. It'll probably all go a little bit wrong, so we'll see what happens. But it's going to be a really interesting conference. There's lots of interesting flights going to happen. Oh, blast! I'm sorry, Simon. I would have enjoyed meeting you there. Anyway, dear viewer, wherever you might be in the world, thanks very much for staying with us, John, Steve, H&R, and you lot, the normal lot. Thank you very much for being here. We'll see you all again, 2100 Gin and Tonic next week, when hopefully we will talk about remote ID in the UK. Cheers all. Look after yourselves. Bye-bye for now.